I spent thousands of games trying to get my account to the point it is at now, and then I hit a brick wall, as I'm sure almost every single player in World of Tanks does, where your win rate just does not move. So I decided to try and change it up and figure out how I can improve myself as a player to end up from an account like this to an account like this. And no, I didn't just play tier 6 overpowered premiums, which has allowed me to get nearly double my average damage every single game, increase my average experience by over 200, and be able to increase my win rate by an additional 5%, alongside the highest ever damage I've dealt on both of these accounts. So stay tuned until the end of the video where you can see exactly how I did it, so hopefully you can too. One of my biggest weaknesses of my own gameplay was that when I was playing on the main account that I was using, is I just was playing a lot of tank destroyers, and that's bound to happen when you have premium tank destroyers that are very good at making credits, but they're not necessarily the best way to learn the game, as you're often kind of spending a lot of time at the back. You don't get that many shots, and when they have higher alpha, you're not in those close quarters engagements which allow you to learn the weak points of various different tanks, and they also don't allow you to be able to get enough shots in where you're kind of having to trade a lot better than, you know, getting free shots of damage from long ranges, which doesn't help you improve whatsoever, other than, yeah, you might learn how to lead shells, but that isn't going to be able to drastically improve your games, as you'll find, you know, you might deal 10 more shots of damage from being sniping in the back in one game, but then the next game your team might ruffle stomp the opponents and you end up with only a couple shots actually fired in the entire game, and that can be a real big problem. Now, am I saying you can never get better if you play tank destroyers or slower tanks? No, but if you are interested in really getting to grips with learning the game and the core game mechanics and maxing your account to be able to have the best results, I would strongly recommend avoiding tank destroyers for the very first portion until you've learnt the game a little bit more, at which point tank destroyers can become super overpowered and become very, very strong in the game, because now you know how to actually do all of the rest of it, and you can be aggressive in even some of the paper tank destroyers to deal even more damage than you were before. Now, the second kind of portion is that although you might be playing a lot of heavy tanks and being somewhat further forward than you'd expect, a lot of the time I was finding in my own gameplay that I just missed out on so many damaging hits during the games because I wasn't being A, either aggressive enough, or B, not confident enough in that actually the best games I was having is on losses, which, I mean, is probably not the way you want to go. And I was finding, you know, I was ending up on decent amount of hit points at the end of the game, which you don't need in a winning victory where you're ruffle stomping the opponents. And actually I could have done with trading my health at the end game to be able to get more damage, and I just was not doing this. And as soon as I realized, you know what, the gloves are off, I'm just going to decide to just commit sometimes. Sometimes it will end up badly, it does happen, you know, you get hit by an FE 4005, you get hit by a high alpha TD who's camping in a bush in the back of their spawn at the end of the game. It takes you out and you might do a little bit less damage, but if you don't do and actually make the pushes, you miss out on way more shots, because although there are a lot of opportunities for you to get removed very quickly, they don't usually actually negatively impact you as much as just not actually pushing. And I was basing myself and my kind of gameplay in the last few hundred, maybe 500 games on being more aggressive to push forward and just basically train up my own aim and as much as I can my in-game ability, rather than kind of staying more passive and seeing how the game plays out, because I have played thousands and thousands of games on console, which is granted a completely different game, and in fact played about 25,000 games, but when it came to PC there was just something not clicking, and it just took that little bit more confidence to realize, no, I can still be just as aggressive, I just need to do it in a specific way. And that is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people miss out on so much damage. There is so many points that I see people sat in a bush at the end of the game looking one direction and not even seeing that there's multiple opponents they can hit to the right. Yeah, they might take, you know, for example, one hit, but they could quite easily deal 5 or 6 and they just miss out on thousands of damage for free. And yeah, that is one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of people doing, and I made it myself, so hopefully you guys don't. The next tip I have for you guys is that a lot of the time I was finding that I was staying in one spot, even if it would work, and obviously, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out that if you're staying in one spot that isn't working at the beginning of the game and you stay there to the end, it's probably going to end up with a pretty bad result. And yes, it did, but since I've realized that sometimes taking one hit to be able to relocate early before, you know, getting just stuffed by the enemy team who are obviously on a failing flank, or just simply taking one hit, maybe 2, to be able to get into a much better position is going to give you so many more shots onto opponents, and it just allows you to really get to grips with loads and more of the map. You find small little positions that you realize you can use, and it just opens up your awareness. It keeps you in the fight for longer, as you're not dead within, you know, 2 minutes of the game starting on a flank that's been dominated by 10 of the enemy tanks who've all gone one way. And also it allows you to kind of understand how you can combat that in your own gameplay, which you just wouldn't get in the standard kind of games that you would do if you were staying more stationary and playing very passively. And passive play will get you to a point on the game and it is worth using, but a lot of the time, if you do it too much, you're going to end up with way better, way worse results, and you probably end up with less survival rating than if you were to be a little bit more aggressive in certain situations. The next bit that I want to talk about is, of course, a controversial topic, which is gold rounds, bond equipment, premium consumables, and the list goes on. Now, this is something that does impact your game, but I don't give it as much like thought as I think a lot of people do. Everyone thinks that the good players are only good because they're using consumables and equipment, when in reality all they're doing is just trying to min-max their account. Now, yes, it does provide you with statistical bonuses, which is why I decided to try and spend a bit of money on the main account to purchase some of the bond equipment using my bonds that I'd saved up over a long period of time, and also I went ahead and purchased some of the bounty equipment and actually upgraded it to be able to get the bonuses that I want, such that, you know, you can use them on various different tanks that you're playing, because they do give you slight bonuses, and although they're not going to change the game and you're suddenly going to add 5% win rate to your gameplay, they do help, especially when it comes to accuracy, as this is one of the, when you can negate RNG in the game, it's actually one of the best things that you can do, which is why everyone seems to focus on accuracy and reducing your aiming circle size as much as possible with your equipment loadouts, such that you can just essentially just hit your shots more often. And if you can do that, it's going to add a couple shots a game to the damage total that you're dealing, which is a massive improvement, and you can generally do a lot better. Now, gold rounds is a similar sort of thing, whereby no, you don't have to load full premium, and although doing that might be beneficial in some tanks, whereby, you know, statistically, if you aren't just using standard, it might be better. For example, when you have an AP round as standard and then you use an APCR round there as your premium, then the APCR round generally is just better in every way, more penetration, a faster shell, and of course the same damage. Whereas, you know, if for example you had an AP and a heat round, or a APCR and a heat round as your standard and premium, often it's actually useful to take AP rounds, because they are going to be handy for those situations where you come up against side of tanks where they have a ton of tracks. And yes, it is worth firing standard. So sometimes I feel like people put a lot of the credit as to why people are good to using premium ammo, and my challenge to that is you go ahead, put full premium in multiple tanks that you play, and see if it adds an extra 6% to your win rate, or an extra 16% to your win rate if, for example, you're a 45% win rate player, to see if it really does make that much difference. And I can almost guarantee it will do nothing. And that is really, it's like you give a worksman a tools, but if they're a bad worksman, they're not going to be able to use the tools. And that's simply it. And essentially, premium rounds just add in the feature that it helps you to avoid bouncing, and although if you learn all of the weak points you can effectively deal damage consistently, it just avoids you being able to actually not do damage if you do actually pen and you low roll on your penetration. So that out the way, I know there'll be some people in the comment section absolutely being like, no, it's only CCRNG or whatever, but I played over 4,500 games in this game before, you know, I was ever a CA. So yeah, I mean, half the logic of these people literally doesn't stack up, and so yeah, that's my reaction to some of those. But for you, please just try out all of the things that you have to your advantage when you can, as well as take into account all of the things that we've talked about in this video. And although it's very difficult to give you one specific spot that you go on a map, or for example giving you certain equipment loadouts, as loads of tanks differ and they all have various different thought processes in between picking equipment and being able to min-max your account with certain tanks, I want to give you a general overview, things you can do to get better. And although we haven't done it in this video, I am going to be doing a full series on equipment. We're going to be talking about ammo types and stuff like that within videos, giving you sheer examples. So if you're wanting that, please do think about subscribing, and we'll get onto that in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully that's going to be good for you guys and you'll learn a thing or two like I did when I went through this journey. And if you enjoyed going through this journey with me, then feel free to like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.